You're listening to Beyond Bizarre True Crime, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, 3 Men and a Mystery, and All Things Crime. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime. We're your hosts for this episode. I'm Cam.
And I'm Jen, and we host the show Our True Crime Podcast.
In today's episode, we will be talking about a case that is beyond bizarre.
It's the case of Katarzyna Zowada. So for today, we're going to go to Poland to discuss a case that is considered one of the most disturbing cases in the country's history. And I'm not joking when we say this is truly beyond bizarre.
It's also graphic, so be warned.
We tried to tone it down.
We did.
For those squeamish, this is a content warning for you. Katarzyna Zowada, or Kaja, as her mother called her, had a doctor's appointment on November 12th, 1999, and she never showed up. In fact, Kaja would never come home. What would happen to her would be so unthinkable and so graphic that one would think it only happens in movies. I also want to add that I'm doing the best to pronounce these Polish words and names and things, so just bear with us. But we're trying. The 23-year-old woman was a college student at Jagiellonia University in Krakow, and she had just changed her major from psychology to religion. She was timid and introverted, and she had very few friends. Kaja also loved music, especially the Grateful Dead. She kind of really enjoyed that hippie culture. And she spent much of her time in music stores looking for rare records to collect. Kaja had struggled with her mental health in the past, but ever since her father passed away 2 years prior, her depression had deepened. She had been very close with her dad. They spent a lot of time together, and his loss took a toll on her. Her mother, Bogusława, insisted she seek psychiatric help. Kaja did agree to go. On the day of her appointment, her mother was supposed to meet Kaja at the doctor's office, but Kaja never showed up. After calling everyone she could think of to find her daughter, her mother called the police and reported her missing. And of course, like a lot of times here, the police advised her to just wait it out. Kaja would come home when she was ready.
I think as a parent, you kind of know your child, and especially her mom, knowing that she was dealing with some mental issues, probably knew something was not quite right.
Oh, I could guarantee
Mother's
it. And I couldn't believe how frustrated she must have been. When the police were called once again about Kaja, they started looking into her disappearance, but they were stumped. When they spoke to some of her classmates in her classes at the university, they couldn't give the police any information. She was quiet and withdrawn. She rarely spoke in class. All they could tell the police was that she had stopped attending classes 3 weeks before she had vanished. Police thought it was possible that she was seeing someone, so maybe she took off with them. But others suggested that Kaja may have ended her own life. But her mother resisted that idea. She refused to believe her daughter would take her own life.
Again, mother's intuition.
Mm-hmm. Fast forward to January 6, 1999 on the Vistula River. Captain Mieczysław was pulling his tugboat called the Moose, or Elk, depending on Google Translate. You can't really rely that heavily on Google Translate, as we all know, when the propeller and motor stopped. He and his deckhand went to see what caused the issue, and at first it looked like it was possibly a grocery bag or some sort of fabric had intertwined itself in the propeller. When they brought the object on deck, they were hit with the most putrid smell. The crew stood looking at this pale, rubber-like sack. and then they noticed a human ear was attached.
Oh, my.
Now, I'm not saying this was something like somebody sewed some kind of ear onto fabric. What they had pulled up was the skin that had been meticulously separated off the front of a female torso.
Oh, my.
We're going to spare you all the graphic details. I'm not going to go into it, but the coroner would later say that the skin had been in the river for at least 2 weeks.
And she disappeared in November?
Yes, middle of November.
She was... okay.
Mm-hmm. Police were called, and they immediately started searching the Vistula River, hoping to find the rest of the body. A week later, divers employed by the police found the lower portion of a right leg, a small portion of flesh from the buttock area, and small pieces of clothing.
At this point, do you know, could they tell, did they think the body had been in the river this whole time and it had somehow separated, or were they...
Well, they said it was cut precisionally off the body. So
they knew it was something else. Okay.
Mm-hmm. In fact, I believe they immediately started calling the perpetrator Hannibal Lecter.
Oh.
A DNA test was conducted to identify the remains, which was the first time this genetic testing was ever conducted in Poland, which is very interesting. DNA confirmed that they belonged to the missing Kasia. On a side note, in 2016, a special group of Polish divers were sent back to search the bottom of the Vistula River to try to find more of Kasia's remains. This group has had luck in finding remains in different bodies of water. Even after several years, they've gone missing or passed. And actually, on one of these dives, they had found items that they believed to be Kasia's. But as of what, we don't know. That information has kind of not been made public.
They kept that for the trial.
For trial. In May of 1999, police received a call from an elderly man who had gone to visit his son. Instead of finding his son, he found his 26-year-old grandson, Vladimir, wearing a mask made out of the flesh of his father.
He had a human...
Yes.
What?
Down in the basement, police found the headless body of Vladimir's father hanging upside down.
Oh.
Vladimir had taken the skin off his father's skull and sewn a head covering, which kind of like a ski mask, front and back.
Oh.
Vladimir was arrested and diagnosed with a borderline schizoid personality disorder, which I'm no doctor, but okay.
I'd say that's full on. Call me crazy, but...
Since killing someone and skinning them isn't all that common, thank goodness, police felt for sure that Vladimir was Kasia's killer.
I would think so.
When they dug deeper, they discovered that Vladimir had went to the same university as Kasia, only he had enrolled a year earlier.
Oh.
But no matter how hard they tried, the police couldn't find anything that would connect the two. Even a search of Vladimir's house didn't give any evidence that Kasia had ever been there, much less murdered. So they dropped Vladimir as a suspect, and they did charge him with the murder of his father, where he received 25 years. Then, after a year of searching, all the leads dried up. And that was it. It went cold. In 2012, the case was reopened by the X-Archive team, or what we would call the Cold Case Division, which I think the X-Archives team was kind of cool. I was calling it the X-Files for a while before.
I think that's what I thought. I read an article that had that, X-Files, but I could be wrong.
They exhumed Kasia's remains, and a team from 3D Enterprise Laboratory from the Medical University of Wrocław made a 3D model of the injuries to the skin. Experts from around the world were called in, and the opinion was that the killer had used a sharp instrument on her neck, armpit, and groin, which caused Kasia to bleed to death.
Ugh.
Not to mention, it would have been extremely painful before taking the skin off of her torso like a skilled surgeon.
So he didn't kill her first. He did this. She passed from blood loss rather than him killing her and then doing these awful things.
He was torturing her, basically, yes. Mm-hmm. Many experts from Southern Europe and the FBI created a psychological profile of the perpetrator. Not one of these experts had ever seen a case like this before, except for Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs, and that's purely fiction, or so they thought anyway.
And the other guy from Poland.
Mm-hmm. Police pretty much have kept a lot of the psychological profiles away from the public, only stating about how the killer had sadistic tendencies and he would likely be bothersome towards women. Professor Duarte Nuno Vieira from the University of Portugal, who specializes in identifying torture on the human body. He stated that Kaja was horribly tortured before her death, and the manner in which the injuries were inflicted indicated that the killer knows martial arts. Now, he specified one particular type of martial arts, but that too is being held back from the public.
That's interesting. I wonder if, like, the way she was hurt would indicate, like...
There wasn't much that they found of her. They were just
How would they know that? That's
leg,
amazing.
The lower part of a leg. So maybe the trauma to the lower part of the leg? I don't know, but I digress. I did find a lot of armchair detectives giving their profile of the killer, but I'm not going to include any of that in this episode because, or anyone interested in true crime can guess that he's a white man in his 20s and 30s, right? On October 4th, 2014, police received a letter or a diary, once again, depending on the Google Translate, with information that led to the arrest of 52-year-old Robert J. Now, we're calling him Robert J. because due to privacy laws in Poland, surnames of suspects are not given out, so we are going to respect those laws. But if you're really interested in them, a simple internet search will be perfect. You'll be able to find it no problem. Robert had been in the military in his 20s where he worked in the morgue, and he helped with autopsies. He then worked at the Zoology Institute where he dissected and skinned the animals. He was also let go after he tortured and killed animals.
All the signs
He's sounding good. Police had already known about Robert because back in the year 2000, Robert's neighbors told police to look into Robert for Kaja's murder.
In 2000?
In 2000, because he was known to stalk women. Sometimes he stalked women in women's clothing. But after Kaja died, he kind of engrossed himself into religion. And he then spent hours at the gym, and he also practiced martial arts. There's also talk he was seen at Kaja's gravesite.
Interesting.
Sounds promising.
Doesn't sound good, Robert.
After Robert is arrested, police search his apartment, and there they found Kaja's DNA in the bathroom. Now, I've read places that it was a hair. I've read places that blood was found in the bathtub, and I've read that it was found on the mirror. Once again, I'm not sure. All we know is Kaja's DNA was found.
And DNA doesn't lie.
Now, in the letter or diary that the investigators received, there were details on how Robert tied up Zaja and locked her in her room and tortured her for days before skinning her alive.
Ugh.
The indictment against Robert is close to 800 pages long. I cannot imagine all the evidence that they have.
And I would not want to be the one to read it.
Read it? The trial to convince Robert for Zaja's murder started in September of 2019, just a few years ago. Robert told the court, "I understand the accusation made against me. I do not plead guilty. I am innocent." He also claims that he does not know Kaja.
If he doesn't know her, how does Robert explain the DNA in the bathroom?
Ding, 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 ding. Yep, that's it. As of today, Robert is still in prison, and his trial hasn't really been finished. They've had a lot of hurdles and heaps and bounds to even get this started. One of the original judges on the case resigned, so they had to get another judge to take in his place. But he filed an extension because he needed to go over all 800 pages of that indictment. So as of right now, we could pretty much guess that our friend Robert here is
guilty.
So
I guess they don't have a right to a fair and speedy trial since he's kind of just languishing in prison.
That
waiting.
I don't know, but it's been a while. But anyway, that is the case of Katarzyna Zowada. It's very disturbing and totally beyond bizarre.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime. We hope that you'll listen to us on Our True Crime Podcast, where every week we take turns discussing cases you may have never heard before. You can find us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find us on Twitter at Our True Crime Pod and at Our True Crime Podcast on Instagram or on our website, ourtruecrimepodcast.com.
Be sure to tune in next episode of Beyond Bizarre True Crime, which will be hosted by our friend Javier from Pretend and Criminal Conduct. As we wrap up this episode, we want to leave you with a short preview of our show.
Last year, there were nearly 22,000 murders in the U.S. Not surprisingly, More than 200 true crime podcasts launch every year in the U.S. alone. There's no shortage of crimes and no shortage of crime podcasts to cover them, but none of those shows have the heart of Our True Crime Podcast.
Thank goodness.
Well, hell, they didn't even have seatbelt laws back then.
He never wore seatbelt. Yeah, it's fine. He could not remember exactly what happened and thought that he had blacked out. That was about it. That's all he could tell officers.
No. He was drawing things saying the thoughts won't stop.
I want to see how this plays out.
It's heartbreaking.
Isn't it time you made Our True Crime Podcast your true crime podcast? Our True Crime Podcast, available on all your favorite podcasting apps.
Beyond Bizarre True Crime is produced by Mike Morford and Jess Betancourt for AbJack Entertainment, with music by Connor Betancourt. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you are listening now, and please take a moment to rate and review the show. You can find Beyond Bizarre True Crime on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BeyondBizarreTC. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Beyond Bizarre True Crime Podcast. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests on Beyond Bizarre True Crime do not necessarily represent those of the show's creators, producers, or sponsors. Be sure to tune in on Saturdays for all new episodes of Beyond Bizarre True Crime.